We are now going to go live by Zoom from columnist Mark Schulman, who is a columnist for Newsweek and author of Tel Aviv Diary. Good evening, Mark. Good to see you.
Thank you.
So let's talk about this. I know you have been following the day's events. He, of course, the prime minister has denied any claims of wrongdoing. He actually used the word astonished. Why is he astonished?
He's astonished because it's a political campaign as well as a legal campaign. He's playing two games at the same time. One, legal, he wants to be found not guilty, but more importantly to him, most of the time is the political campaign, to put political pressure, to show that he's the one who's being persecuted, as opposed to being prosecuted. I think it's important that people understand the reason he had to go on, he testified today, is the Israeli system is very different, let's say, than the American system. In Israel, if a defendant does not testify, it's considered something that can be used against him, as opposed to America, where you're not allowed to use it against you. If a defendant does not testify, that's considered a sign of guilt. And on top of which, in an Israeli system, by and large, the person who's on trial starts the defense as opposed to the end of the defense. So this is the beginning of the defense, and he had a chance today to tell his story. It's going to be a long story. I mean, think about it. He's going to be talking about the first case, the case 4000, which they're doing first for almost a month, talking about what went on there, and then that's going to go on to the 2000 and 1000. I mean, people are talking about judicial reform in this country. What you need is shorter trials, obviously, which is a big.
I mean, even the O.J. trial, O.J. Simpson trial was shorter. So talking about the fact that, people claiming that he tried to control the media, as we just saw in this long report, but he's insisting also today that he, in fact, was trying to diversify the media in Israel. So is there any truth to that, or is that a pivot?
Look, I'm sure he would like to diversify. He did that more recently by creating Channel 14. And other changes have taken place in the media. But the fact of the matter is he tried to manipulate it, at least according to the charges. The charges are not just he was trying to find an investor to invest in a new media or something else. He tried to provide, according to the prosecution, effective bribes in order for that to happen. And that's what he's being charged with. He's being charged with give and take in terms of the media, in terms of giving Bezeq approval to merge their Hot and Bezeq into one entity, which was worth a lot of money. All these things are gray sometimes, but they're recordings and there are various witnesses that have come forth and given proof. The one case that's almost airtight is the 1000 case, the case of the champagne and the cigars and the jewelry. I mean, it's not like, a few $1,000s. We're talking about over 100,000 shekels, which is about $30,000 that was charged. There's a lot more involved from what I understand as well. And for that, there really isn't any defense other than saying friends can give gifts. But these friends that gave gifts, in this case, there's testimony showing that he requested the things, not a question of just friends who said, oh, it's his birthday, I'm going to give you a gift. So all of this is sort of a pattern, don't forget. And that's part of why the cases are together, of showing a sort of corrupt intent that at least the prosecutors are trying to prove.
Right. Well, also, I mean, this trial has been a long time coming. It's already been 5 years ago since he was indicted. He was being investigated before that. And witnesses started testifying as long as 3 years ago. Of course, we had COVID. We have had the war ongoing since October 7th of last year. But, what has Netanyahu done to delay the completion of the trial?
Mostly it's his lawyers who've done it. They've delayed things. As you mentioned, the prosecution finished in June. The defense managed to put off his testimony now until December. They delayed in terms of every single prosecution witness. There was a prosecution witness that was on the stand for 2 weeks for the prosecution and for a month and a half, almost 2 months, by the defense in cross-examination. Again, these are things that are almost unique to the Israeli system. You would not see that in an American courthouse where you'd be able to cross-examine a witness for a month and a half. You look at every single witness, they did that time and time again, and that's part of the reason it's taken so long. Now, of course, the system in Israel where you have judges as opposed to a jury, you couldn't possibly have a jury sitting for 4 years. Think about that. So Here the judges, they get paid anyway, so they keep on coming, I guess, even if they're tired of this trial.
Well, and then you add, obviously, the judicial reform. You understand that clearly there seems to be more red tape, and it is interesting that there is no jury here. I'm wondering what would be different if there was.
Well, number one, it wouldn't take so long. You couldn't possibly hold a jury for so long. They'd also, first, they get bored. You'd have to be very much more specific.
And they
Juries
don't get paid.
they don't get, well, they get paid a little bit, but not real money. And the fact of the matter is, it has to be much quicker. Look, Israel needs judicial reform, not that sort of reform they were talking about in changing the balance of power between the government. Judicial reform Israel needs is A, trials can't take forever, and they do in this country. They really take forever. B, by and large, in the United States, and I think in Great Britain as well, a trial begins, certainly a criminal trial. It'll begin on Monday, and the trial will meet Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and in the next week, and it'll be over.
I know.
You don't have
Yeah.
a situation where trial dates are set 1 month apart, then 2 months apart, then 5 months apart. On top of everything else, the system is so bizarre in that the judges who are charging it after 2 years are expected after that to try to remember who testified in which way and decide who they believed and who they didn't believe based on some notes they took from
Right,
6
who
months
remembers,
ago.
yeah, trying to remember yesterday is hard enough. Well, especially something like this, which is so tedious and detail-oriented and obviously very, a lot of going through the weeds. It is hard to retain so much information if each person on the stand is taking so long.
And the judges have more than one case at the same time. It's not just the only case. They're doing this 3 times a week. The other 2 times a week are dealing with other cases. So these men are supermen, I guess, but there's a limit to how much they can be supermen.
Sure.
So these are sort of reforms we need. This trial is an example of why Israel needs judicial reform, just a very different judicial reform. And that's why, by the way, you ask Israelis, you're in favor of judicial reform. A lot of them are, without getting into the details, because most Israelis have dealt with the system. And as you can see, these are very problematic aspects of the system.
Yeah.
And of course, there are other aspects, trial without, being held without bail, all those sort of things that for people who come from the United States and to a lesser extent Great Britain, other places are foreign to them.
Right.
So these are changes Israel does need.
Quickly before we're almost completely out of time. I mean, so what happens if they find the prime minister guilty?
Well, then he goes to appeals, and he can go to appeal.
That'll be another 5 years.
So he'll go up to the Supreme Court, and the law in Israel is that he can remain prime minister until the final appeal is determined. So let's put it this way. I wish him much health and long life, but it's not at all clear that a final decision will be made during his lifetime, the way things are going. So,
all right. Thank you very much on that note, Mark Schulman.